Welcome to the FTSO show, Figure That Stuff Out. I'm your host, Sarah, along with my co-hosts, Brant and Liz.
That's right, Sarah. We've got an exciting day planned for you here at FTSO talking about sponsorship activation, specifically in the sports industry.
Now, many people are wondering, what is sports sponsorship activation? Well, here at FTSO, we're here to help you figure that stuff out.
So let's get started. When you think of sponsorship, you may think of different forms of branding, such as putting logos on bottles or walls. But by doing this, you will only benefit from about 10% of what a sponsorship actually is. The other 90% comes into play through activation, or the methods and strategies you use to activate or switch on, so to speak, your sponsorship. In order to get a full return on your sponsorship investment, you must invest, in some cases, 5 times the initial sponsorship investment into the activation stage in order to ensure your sponsorship is effective and fulfills the outcomes of both the sponsor and your intended audience. The aforementioned methods used to activate are included in the marketing mix. This includes handing out brochures and samples of products, offering promotional sales on the back of event tickets, and giving away free items to lucky section numbers.
So now we'll go over the typical industry convention that sponsors use when it comes to activating and leveraging sponsorship deals. As Sarah explained earlier, activation is normally referred to as the ratio to the cost of the rights fees. And while there are many varying ratios in the industry, the typical industry standard tends to be from 1:1 to 4:1. The main idea here is that in order for your brand to gain awareness and equity with consumers, you need to spend past the rights fee to be a sponsor. You need to spend additional money to activate your sponsorship and get your alliance in front of consumers, whether that be through games, merchandise, or other forms of sponsorship.
Activation is the action behind a sponsorship. When Dana needs to make a commercial to promote its new sponsorship with Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott, activation includes the extra costs. Everything from the production crew, the equipment, renting out a space at SMU and Highland Park, as well as the athlete and the products themselves. Technology enhances sponsorship activation by connecting people with relevant content through a new platform called digital media, without taking away from the original platform of television. And technology has allowed sponsors to reach consumers basically anytime and anywhere, not at just a specific event like a football game. While most people associate sponsorship and advertising and put them together, the two are actually separate from one another. Consumers see sponsorship in a positive light and consider it an indirect communication tool with long-term benefits, not just the short-term benefits that are associated with advertising. So simply, sponsorship activation works to establish a long-term connection, not briefly placing a logo in front of a consumer.
So at this point, you may be asking yourself, well, how do I activate my sponsorship? Well, here are your guidelines. The first step is to activate your event ambassadors. The second is to create content engagement.
Next, you're going to want to include digital integration, digital touch points, create an online to create brand affinity.
You're also going to want to maximize digital reach, target your promotions, measure performances, and generate leads.
So next, we're going to go over how to do sponsorship activation. Simply put, the first step you're going to want to do is align your brand with your sponsor. When beginning the activation stage of a sponsorship, you need to align your brand with the sponsor. You need to make sure that the brand sponsor, it's always important that the goals, objectives, and strategies align with one another. This partnership needs to reach the same target audiences and consumers, which Liz and Sarah will go into further detail next.
Thanks, Brant. You must also target your audience through people's passions. Sponsorship activation goes deeper to bring the sponsors and the consumers together, and more importantly, to meet the emotional needs of the consumers, and by segmenting through psychographics.
Thanks, Liz. Your next step in sponsorship activation is to make sure that the sponsorship is catering to the sport or sport organization that you're sponsoring. Furthermore, when selecting a potential sport or sport organization to tie yourself to, you must make sure that the consumers of that sport are also consumers of your products and services. For example, Wilson would not sponsor a swimming competition because Wilson does not make swimming products or products that consumers of this sport would necessarily need or want.
You're right. You don't think of the term sponsorship activation a ton, but you see it in your daily life. For example, what happens when a football team wins a big game, such as the Super Bowl? Well, they dump a liquid onto their coach. And what is that special liquid called? Gatorade. Since 1983, Gatorade has worked with the NFL. making it the longest partnership in the NFL, and it contributes to the $1.2 billion the NFL received in sponsorships for the 2014 to 2015 season. Thus, sponsorship activation is not always about sticking a company's logo or brand in your face. It's about engaging with the target audience and inspiring them to act, just as the football players are inspired to act by dumping Gatorade on their coaches to celebrate a big win. We're now going to break up into sports so you can see how sponsorship activation works in 3 different areas.
The first area we'll be covering today is soccer. Soccer is a global game, and with that comes many sponsors and methods of sponsorship activation. Perhaps the biggest example of this activation is the brand logo that is printed on the front of every soccer jersey around the world. Whether it be Real Madrid and Arsenal with Fly Emirates or Manchester United with Chevrolet, the players can always be seen playing with these logos and brands across their chest. Managers give post-game interviews with several logos behind them, and there are countless sponsors shown on the LED perimeter technology board surrounding the pitch. Even this year, several sponsors have now invested in sleeve patches to be worn on the jerseys to increase brand awareness even further.
Moving on to college football. If you've ever watched a college football game, you know that Allstate is one of college football's biggest and most active sponsors. Throughout a game, you can see their logo during an extra point or field goal kick. They activate by placing their logo on the nets behind field goal posts. This allows both stadium audiences and viewers on TV to visibly see and remember their logo and brand. They go beyond commercials during TV broadcasts of games or ads on the video boards within the stadiums. By purposely placing their brand in one of the most visible places within a stadium, they have geniusly activated their sponsorship and multiplied their consumer revenue through college football.
And finally, let's take a look at swimming. One of the biggest sponsors in the swimming community is Speedo. From athletes to gear to meets, both globally and domestically, you can find Speedo everywhere. Taking a look at several images, you can see how Speedo activates its sponsorship. Olympic champion Missy Franklin promotes Speedo with a photo, nonchalantly stretching while rocking a Speedo cap, goggles, and racing suit. Currently, Speedo hosts 2 meets in the United States. This shows sponsorship activation by attaching Speedo's name to the meet title, Speedo Sectionals, and Speedo Junior National Championships. Finally, you can see Speedo in all sorts of swimming-related backgrounds, from the banner used for post-race interviews, behind the starting blocks, and on top of the touchpad to showcase Speedo through signage.
We hope these examples explain just how activation is the action behind a sponsorship investment. Thanks for joining us today.
We'll see you next time on FTSO.
Have a great day.